Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia and today I'm reviewing Crooked House by Agatha Christie, which is a detective mystery novel from 1949. This is a Christie murder mystery that's not part of a series, it's a standalone novel. I always keep my reviews spoiler-free, but I feel like in this case it's particularly worth pointing out that if you haven't read the books, you can still watch this review because the vast majority of it is going to be spoiler-free. However, right at the very end of this video, there will be a tiny spoiler section where I'll tell you if my guesses were correct and, what I made of the solution of the case. So right at the end of the video, there will be a spoiler section, but you'll get plenty of warning before then, so don't worry about that. As I've said, I'm fairly new to Agatha Christie books. This is only the third one of hers that I've read. And I picked this because it was a standalone, because it's not part of her more well-established series, I guess. Crooked House opens with a scene set during the war where Charles, who's the protagonist and first-person narrator, and who's sort of implied to be working for the Secret Service, meets and falls in love with a young woman named Sophia Leonides. They get on really well, and he's determined to propose to her once the war is over. Then after the war, they catch up in London, and he finally asks her, but she refuses him. And the reason for her refusal is fairly understandable, actually. It's that her grandfather has just been murdered. He was the head of a large and very wealthy family. And she just rightly feels that in the middle of all this chaos and this investigation, it wouldn't really be right for her to embark on an engagement. Now, by pure coincidence, Charles happens to be the son of the assistant commissioner of the police. And so, directed by his father, but also on the request of his soon-to-be fiancée Sophia, Charles goes and visits the Leonides family home, the titular Crooked House, with the purpose of finding out who did it. This setup, while a bit contrived, is actually pretty fun, because you get all the benefits of the outsider walking around and talking to suspects, but without any of the procedure and the tediousness of an official police investigation. And that aspect, that position of Charles as the detective but also not, is really played up in the book, with the various members of the family constantly complaining to Charles about the police presence in the house, about all these officers walking around, turning everything upside down, while he goes around and does his much more subtle snooping. The stakes for him are really high because he loves Sophia and he cares about her, and for her sake he wants to find out who killed her grandfather. He's not a detached super detective who can approach the situation in a completely objective manner. No, he makes judgments on the people he interviews. There are some people that he likes more than others. He desperately wants Sophia to be innocent, but the truth is, everyone's a suspect in this book. If you couldn't tell already, I enjoyed this book immensely, and that's entirely due to the characters. At first, I thought I'd be confused by the large and somewhat unconventional setup of the Leonides family. There's the murdered grandfather, there's his second wife who's 50 years his junior, there's the first wife's spinster sister, there's his two sons, their wives, there's 3 grandchildren, that's 10, as well as the grandchildren's tutor and their nanny. So there's 12 people living in this house in total, which is a whole lot of suspects. But they're each so perfectly unique, so well drawn, that firstly, it was very easy to tell them apart. And secondly, they're all fascinating characters and very fun to read about. Just like the narrator, as the reader, we judge these characters. We have our suspicions for who might be ruthless enough to kill the patriarch of the family, and for what reasons. As is the case in any good mystery, there are other secrets to be uncovered along the way, a few red herrings, and a surprising amount of plot twists. What makes this a particularly fun mystery is that this is one that's not dependent on technicalities. You don't have to pay super close attention to the descriptions of crime scenes to pick out tiny details. There is a little bit of that. There's a little bit of picking up on clues and hints. But most of the mystery hinges on the people and how they behave and how they talk to the narrator. You really need to get to know this family to find out what's really going on. Something else I enjoyed while reading the book was the humor. Both Charles's inner monologue and Sophia's sharp tongue were a delight, and every time the two of them were together, I enjoyed their dynamic and their relationship. But also the other characters were both fun and funny, either intentionally or not. Characters such as the insecure and sensitive tutor Lawrence, or Sophia's quick-witted younger sister Josephine, or her dramatic actor mother. Some of these characters are stereotypes, such as the matronly nanny or the grandfather's sexy young wife in her mid-30s. Some of them are stereotypes that are twisted up a little bit, though I wouldn't go so far as to say any are truly subverted. Either way, they're interesting and well-drawn and three-dimensional characters that I enjoyed reading about very much. Honestly, I don't have anything at all negative to say about this book. I practically inhaled it and I loved every page of it. One thing I noticed was that as I was reading it, I was struck by the similarities between the premise and plot of Crooked House with the murder mystery film Knives Out, which was on Netflix a few years ago. I won't spoiler that film for you, but there are so many parallels between both stories, even down to the way the victim was actually murdered and some plot twists that play out in exactly the same way. Knives Out is not, as far as I know, a direct adaptation of Crooked House, but it's very clearly heavily inspired by it. So if you enjoyed one, I reckon you'll like the other as well. Right, now we get to the spoiler section, so stop the video here if you haven't read the book yet. I'll give you a few seconds. Right. Agatha Christie gets me every single time with her twists. I was convinced that the murderer was Sophia's younger brother Eustace. He's a moody teenage boy who has more than one grudge against his family. His resentment is coming off him. And he's the sort of suspect who is there but in the background for most of the book. I suspected him from pretty much the moment we meet him. And then it turned out to be the baby sister. I didn't expect to find a 12-year-old killer in the pages of a 1940s murder mystery. But then because having a child killer wasn't metal enough for Agatha Christie, she also had her then killed off by her own great aunt. I didn't see any of that coming. What drama. Just incredible implementation of the shock factor there. Perfectly executed. I loved the ending. This video, by the way, is part of my 12 Decades of Christmas series, in which I review one book from each decade, from the 1900s going up to the 2010s, every day in the run-up to Christmas. This is the 5th video in that series, because this was published in the 1940s, only just, and tomorrow's video will be from the 1950s, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you for watching. Bye!